The Museum of Automata is to be found at the foot of Clifford's Tower in the ancient and historic city of York, the capital of the north of England. Behind a quite modest exterior is a wonderland of magic and ingenuity. An automaton mimics the movement of living things. It's a glorious expression of human inventiveness, created by man for the sheer enjoyment and entertainment of his fellow creatures. The Japanese archer, which dates from the middle of the 19th century, incorporates mechanical ingenuity, precision and beauty, and speaks across centuries, continents and cultures in a language that can be understood by all. The wooden mechanism enables the archer to pick up an arrow, place it in the bow and fire it, not once but 4 times before being rewound. Claude the Clown is the museum's mascot and was made in France towards the end of the 19th century. The battle on which Claude is perched acts as a sound box for the musical movement and, more importantly, conceals the clockwork mechanism. The shape of the cams determines the movement. As they turn on the shaft, they raise and lower levers that animate face and limbs. This technique has brought life to a host of almost human characters. From earliest times, man has been fascinated by the possibilities of incorporating movement into the images he fashioned of himself and his fellow creatures. The earliest known statuette with articulated limbs dates from the Grecian culture, approximately 25,000 years BC. Figurines from ancient Greece and Rome employ simple pivots and drawstrings to bring them to life. As man progressed to more complex mechanical devices, the automaton figures were often second to the mechanism, created as a fanciful ruse by a master to illustrate a scientific principle to his pupils. Hero of Alexandria's dancing figures, driven by a simple reaction motor, are a case in point. Hero lived during the 1st century AD, and he left a valuable record of his own inventions and those of his predecessors. The dancing figures work in the following way. When a fire is lit on the altar, the air inside is heated, expands, and is forced down the central vertical tube and expelled out along the radial tubes. The force of the expanded air pushing against the cylindrical case causes the turntable to revolve, carrying the dancers with it. Hero recorded over 70 theorems, using pneumatics, hydraulics, and simple mechanics to create movement. His writings were to inspire engineers and scientists throughout the Middle Ages. By the 18th century, the singing birds of the ancient Greeks had progressed to the exquisite singing bird boxes of such master craftsmen as Brugier and Rochat. Swiss watchmakers excelled in the manufacture of these tiny birds, refining their mechanisms until it was difficult to distinguish the real from the clockwork. Here the secret of life is revealed. Springs and cams move beak and wings, while bellows and a slide whistle the song. Sometimes such singing birds were concealed in more elaborate settings, such as this lady's nécessaire, also made in Switzerland. Spring-driven clockwork first appeared in the 15th century and provided an efficient portable source of motion which was to be exploited to the full over the next 4 centuries. This gold and jewelled lute was made at the beginning of the 19th century. The strings are held in diamond pegs. The back is finely enamelled. Hidden inside is a dancer, moving to the accompaniment of two musicians playing a drum and a hurdy-gurdy. Two striking jacks imprisoned on the face of a gold Breguet watch sound out the hours while Cupid forges his arrows, taking his rhythm from the beat of time. A more worldly blacksmith is at work above this Rogers clock. Inexorably driven by time, his task is never done, and he works without pause. A striking jack sounds the hour. Before the widespread use of the wristwatch, public clocks helped to regulate the communal day, and striking jacks and automaton scenes were a popular addition. This magnificent 19th century mantel clock was made by Bontemps, primarily a maker of singing birds. He used clocks as showcases for them. The mechanisms of clock and bird are quite separate. Here, the beam engine acts as a pendulum. A group of workmen labour beneath the cathedral clock. Unhurried and unheeding, their work will never be completed. This magician performs his tricks on request, regardless of the hour. The objects on his table mysteriously change each time he raises the cones. A closer look may give the game away. His Black Forest cousin, however, performs on the hour. His trick is the same and his technique similar, but he lacks the glamour of his Middle Eastern friend. If you think his mechanism is also lacking in style, let me introduce you to his industrious companion. The spinner, who also adorns a Black Forest clock, is kept hard at work by little more than a piece of bent wire and a tiny weight. The potato eater is a favourite Black Forest folk character. We will leave you to guess why his plate is always full, despite his voracious appetite. Let us now turn to the work of the 19th century toy maker. Accessible to a far wider public and using cheap materials, there is perhaps no other field where man's mechanical ingenuity is more apparent. Interchangeable cams enable this tin clown to execute a number of sensitive drawings. Here he's deftly sketching a cockerel. An 18th century Japanese design inspired this 19th century tumbler. Mercury is the hidden ingredient, causing the little figure to flip over as it flows from torso to head. The golden boots of the Auto Peripateticus doll were patented in 1862 by the American Enoch Rice Morrison. She treads a sure and steady path, unlike the path of the little French tin plate drunkard from the Ferrand Martin workshop. While the Martin toys were produced in great numbers, this miniature theatre is almost certainly a one-off. 3 double hand-operated belts carry a colourful array of characters across the stage. Each hand-coloured figure is mounted on a wheeled platform, and limbs are animated by fine wires linked to the wheels. During the Napoleonic Wars, French prisoners of war scattered in prisons around England transformed cookhouse bones into mechanical toys to trade for the luxury of soap or even a new pair of trousers. This little drummer is a fine example. Japanese Kobe toys show a macabre sense of humour and were made during the Meiji period for the Western market. Westerners may well have thought they were buying something peculiarly Japanese, but were in reality buying something produced for the foreigner. Far removed from the cheap children's toys are the deluxe automata produced for an adult market during the second half of the 19th century. A group of Frenchmen concentrated in the Marais district of Paris, running quite separate establishments, yet all using the same techniques, produced living sculptures of the multi-talented cosmopolitan characters of Parisian café society. Not only was a whole range of facial expressions captured in papier-mâché or staff, but also the subtleties of hand and body movements. These are portrait faces. Sculptors were employed to immortalize entertainers of the day, and mechanics animated these sculptures, enabling us to witness circus acts that were performed over 100 years ago. Details of costume and face makeup are all faithfully reproduced. In an age before piped music and moving screen images, it must have been wonderful indeed to have a portable entertainer that could be switched on and off at will. Nearly all these pieces have their own musical accompaniment, a cylinder and comb concealed either in the cabinet base or in the body. This clown sleeps whenever he gets the chance. The intermission bell interrupts his slumber, not once, but 3 times. Reminds him of his audience and finally obliges him to start playing again. In this microcosm, anything is possible. A clown serenades the moon. The moon comes down to earth. This piece, entitled Fin de siècle, shared its name with a group of poets, also known as the Decadents. It certainly has a decadent air. Smokers were a favourite subject. Billed in an 1884 catalogue as special attraction for tobacconists, they were prominently placed in shop windows, and no doubt pulled the crowds as they pulled on their meerschaum cigarette holders. If you're worried for their lungs, you have good reason, for the leather bellows that inhale so deeply are not immune to the ravages of nicotine and need a regular overhaul. The fisherman draws comfort from his pipe each time a fish eludes him. An early accumulator keeps the tobacco embers glowing and would have delighted and confused an audience for whom electricity in the home was as yet a rare and privileged thing. He seems philosophical about the lack of fish, persevering to pull out an old shoe, a bottle, and finally, an old tin can. What's this? An artist's impression of the fisherman? An automaton artist, of course. Not only has he captured the fisherman on canvas, but his succession of inedible catches, too. Bob and his learned pig is one of the pride and joys of the museum collection. The levers that animate the pig pass from the base through the back of the chair, along Bob's thigh, and continue up through one side of the ladder. The French have had a special relationship with their pigs ever since they first hunted truffles together. Bob has gone a step further and trained his pig to perform acrobatic stunts on top of a ladder. His expression says it all. These two are from the Vichy workshop and appear side by side in the catalogue. They would have cost about 6 guineas each at a time when the average weekly wage was 24 shillings. They make a harmonious pair. The banjo player will surely win over his ladylove, as will Pierrot his Columbine. The Pierrot writer is perhaps the most romantic piece. He turns up his lamp and writes to his beloved Columbine.
Ma chère Colombine,
My darling Columbine,
le temps passe si vite
time passes so
que
quickly
même les années me paraissent
that even the
courtes.
years seem short to me.
Je t'aime encore
I love you more
davantage.
than ever.
Ton Pierrot pour toujours.
Your Pierrot forever. Dream on, Pierrot. We all have a tale of unrequited love to tell. This gracious lady must have had many admirers in the Parisian salons of the last century. Her hands move in time with the music, and her breast rises and falls, simulating breathing. Her head is papier-mâché. Often, however, if a beautiful young lady was to be portrayed, porcelain heads were bought in from the doll manufacturers. The Lady Magician is a stunning example. The wide-eyed innocence of her Mona Lisa-like smile makes the strange contents of her pots all the more surprising. These young ladies all have porcelain heads by Jumeau. The same gestures could be adapted to blowing kisses, smelling posies, lifting the lids of baskets, or in the case of the figure on the left, promoting perfume with a well-placed label. At the turn of the 20th century, with the advent of electricity, automata were widely sought after for advertising purposes. Ideally suited to shop window displays, electrically driven pieces were eye-catching, modern, and would repeat their routines until the plug was pulled. This was one of the last pieces to be made by the Falaibois firm, shortly before being taken over by the House of Descamps in 1925. It advertises the services of 8 qualified chiropodists, claiming that their operations are painless and offering a solution for sweaty and inflamed feet for a mere 3 francs 50. Novel tricks such as turning pages and window tapping to attract attention could be incorporated. The Jaff coffee drinker appeared in coffee shops and cafes all over Europe. As the demand for electrically driven advertising pieces went up, so the demand for clockwork parlour pieces declined. During the second half of the 20th century, a new breed of automata maker appeared. Unlike the 19th century makers, who employed teams of specialist craftsmen to create the finished product, today's automatists work in isolation, responsible for every aspect of production. There are no rules. Orthodox materials are mixed with found materials and scrap. Eccentric experimentation and recycled junk stand alongside technical brilliance and artistic integrity. Katie Rowe worked on the birth of Venus over a period of many months, using a mixture of lime wood, Douglas fir, and lemon wood. This demanding, time-consuming occupation is rarely profitable, and automatists tend to lead double lives, following more profitable pursuits during the day and beavering away in cellars and garden sheds after hours. Compare the intricacy and grace of Katie's sea scene with the raw economy and power of Peter Markey's. Made of undecorated DIY pine, it's both powerful and lyrical in its effect. The wonderful undulating motion, which is produced by helically arranged cams, is as pleasing from below as it is from above. Jan Zalud also leaves the wood undecorated, but works it to a satin smooth finish. Humour may be subtle, as in his boy with a girl on his mind, or honestly bawdy, as in Frank Nelson's Man in the Loo. Inspiration may be obvious, as in Eric Williamson's superbly crafted Mad Hatter's Tea Party. He has added his own twist to Carroll's well-known tale. Lime wood is used for large-scale carving and pear, with its tight-knit grain, for smaller items. Contrasting woods show the mechanism, which is a work of art in itself, to full advantage. The inspiration for James Chedburn's Mad Professor's musical instrument is more complex. Each key produces both sound and movement, and James lists Gothic architecture, religion, mythology, and plumbing among the many influences on his work. Here the instrument is more recognizable, but not always more tuneful. A 26-note spinet in the base of this automaton provides the sound for David Secret's music lesson. A jester and a harlequin struggle with some early English melodies. The harlequin concentrates on the music, the jester is more interested in his audience and even occasionally forgets to play. Political comment raises its head from time to time. Here, Frank Nelson makes clear his feelings about Maggie Thatcher's poll tax. Modern automata are described variously as working models, 3D cartoons, and works of art. The contemporary collection is constantly growing and changing. There is another far more serious development this century. Robots and automatic machines have found their place in industry and the home. These functional machines bear little resemblance to their automaton ancestors. Unlike the clockwork interior of last century's automata, where cause and effect can be visibly traced, the electronic entrails of today's robots belie the movements they command. This IBM robot assembled computer keyboards for years before being relegated to the museum. Machines can store information and act upon it. The possibilities are endless. And so the serious rubs shoulders with the frivolous. A visit to the museum is incomplete without a stroll along the pier. It is, after all, on the pier that many of our modern automata makers first encountered automata. Every pier has its fortune teller, and this one is no exception. Madame Eva is her name. The saucy sailor gets his comeuppance. Big Bert Chaos has a dog called Order. It will be a tall order to order Big Bert to order. One of the last characters you will encounter as you leave the museum is the Laughing Man. Commissioned by a pharmaceutical firm to advertise a cure for kidney problems, is he trying to tell us that it's only his laughter that's infectious now? The Museum of Automata is above all a tribute to man's ingenuity and sense of fun. Out of the visions of our ancestors have appeared the robots of today, and along that pathway all manner of men have contributed.